My mental health as a mom of a child with a disorder like this has felt really, really challenging. I have a lot of days where I question everything. I have a lot of days where I feel like I can't go on anymore. I feel a lot of days where my husband and I both feel at a complete loss on the lack of support we sometimes feel, the lack of understanding we sometimes feel, the lack of direction and clarity we sometimes feel. And it's okay to say those things. That's what I want us to make sure we're focusing on. We have to be okay with saying these things. Because when we sit and hold the emotion and the feelings and the thoughts all inside of ourselves, that's when we get into places of feeling really dysregulated, of exploding, of not being able to show up in the way I know that we want to show up for ourselves and our families. I wanted to have a candid conversation today about mental health as a mom of 4 kids and also as a mom of a medically complex kiddo. For those of you that might be newer to following the podcast, I am so incredibly grateful to connect with you, to be in community here, to talk about all things wellness, and to share more of my heart around what it is to be a mom of 4, but specifically to be a mom of a medically complex kid. So our son has a genetic disorder called tuberous sclerosis complex. It actually is something that's recognized or talked about every May during Mental Health Awareness Month. And it is a complex disorder because it's oftentimes in congruence with autism and epilepsy. Our son is autistic, our son is epileptic, and he also is a TSC kid. TSC is a disorder where the body creates these benign tumors or growths on major organs like the heart, the brain, the lungs, the kidneys, the skin, and eyes. And so we've been on an 8+ year journey of discovering what he needs, how to best support him, different interventions, different doctors, all kinds of appointments, and so many different things. And I like to be transparent about our journey because I know that there are women and families out there that have disorders, that have disabilities, that have diagnoses that they are managing. And I am someone who believes in the power of normalizing the discussion around the mental and emotional component to managing this in your home, to managing this in your life, and talking about the weight of it all, because it's not an easy path. I have many days where I think to myself, this is not what I asked for. This is not what I am equipped for. This is not the path that I had imagined for our family of 6. I've talked about this in other episodes on the podcast, and that's what I want to kind of talk about today, is this mental health component to wellness as a mom of a medically complex kid, of a kid that maybe has a diagnosis. And how do we really continue to be a support to one another? How do we be in community? How do we make sure that we're taking care of our own health so we can take care of the health of the people around us? So recently in our home, we've had some hurdles with my son. And my husband and I have reached some points of really debilitating loss in the past couple months. And that's been hard. It's hard to look across the room at your spouse and say, I am at a total loss on how to help our son. I am at a total loss on how to help our child. And we've had a lot of moments like that in our entire season of trying to continue to figure out his diagnosis and this disorder, but also in the past handful of months. As I've also shared on different episodes of the podcast, our son is epileptic. And so we've been managing seizures while he sleeps for over the past year. Finally, in the past 4 to 5 weeks, we finally have a little bit more seizure resolution. So he's going 20-ish days without a seizure, which is the longest he's gone in over a year, which feels like a massive blessing, massive win for us. At the same time, we don't have seizure control. So my husband and I have been sleeping with our son and switching off every other night to make sure that he's safe. Last year, I'm actually inside a Mothers of TSC group. And last year, there were 2 different moms that shared about losing their child to seizures in the middle of the night. And my heart has never felt more shattered for those families and more shattered for the people that are managing this disorder, because it is complex. There's a lot of different pieces to it. And so when I think about my own mental health inside of this disorder, there's so much that I'm trying to personally work through. There's so much that feels really hard and debilitating. There's a lot that feels scary. There's a lot that feels unknown. There's a lot that feels like I don't have any idea how I'm going to continue to press through this or figure this out or be a support or show up as the mom I'm meant to be or being called to be in order to really support my son well. And when I hear stories like what I heard inside of that mom's group, I feel totally lost. I feel like so much is out of my control. And when I let my headspace get too far into that zone of focusing the most on everything that I can't control, that's when I feel the most scared. So that's kind of what I want to talk about today. When I think about mental health and I think about managing neurodiversity and I think about managing medical complexity and I think about managing differences, if you will, I want to talk about this concept of what's out of our control. And I've talked about this in other capacities related to wellness, related to our health as women, but I want to talk about it specifically related to our mental health as moms of kids that have medical complexity, who have some sort of disorder or diagnosis. And how do we make sure that we're really nurturing ourselves with intention? Because if we don't, and we live in those zones of focusing most on all of the things that feel hard and all of the things that are out of our control, it will not serve us and our own wellness. And that's the most profound thing I want to make sure we're calling to attention today. My mental health as a mom of a child with a disorder like this has felt really, really challenging. And I've already kind of shared that. I have a lot of days where I question everything. I have a lot of days where I feel like I can't go on anymore. I feel a lot of days where my husband and I both feel at a complete loss on the lack of support we sometimes feel, the lack of understanding we sometimes feel, the lack of direction and clarity we sometimes feel. And it's okay to say those things. That's what I want us to make sure we're focusing on. We have to be okay with saying these things. Because when we sit and hold the emotion and the feelings and the thoughts all inside of ourselves, that's when we get into places of feeling really dysregulated, of exploding, of not being able to show up in the way I know that we want to show up for ourselves and our families. That's really what the purpose of this podcast is today, is to normalize the things that I have felt, the thoughts that I have had, that you maybe have had too. And I want to normalize that it's okay to say them. It's okay to normalize them. It's okay to feel them. It's okay to be angry around them. It's okay to feel sadness around them. It's okay to express it. I think one of the most profound things that my husband and I have learned with an autistic son, with an epileptic son, with a son who has incredible uniqueness beyond our wildest dreams. One of the things that we've learned more than anything is how much he absorbs our energy, how much he mimics exactly what we do, our body language, our tone, what we're expressing. So the biggest gift that I've given to our family and the biggest gift I continue to give myself is continued depth into figuring out how I can express my emotion in ways that feel appropriate or aligned or whatever. And when they don't, figuring out ways to make sure that I'm always expressing that I'm imperfect, that I need forgiveness, that I'm also learning too, that it's never going to be this picture perfect situation. And also understanding that part of my emotional and mental health is learning through the different areas of my life that make me feel dysregulated, that make me feel like I can't go on, like I can't control all the things that are even outside of my control or inside of my control. And so much of that comes from expressing the mental and emotional piece to our life and to this diagnosis. So when I say like managing dysregulation or managing my own feelings, managing my own emotion, managing my own thoughts, so much of that for me has become learning how to externally process and to talk to people about it in therapy sessions with friends that I trust, in groups and communities where I feel like we are heard, seen, and loved. All of those places are ways that I can continue to really work through my own level of dysregulation that I feel when so much of this crops up for me mentally and emotionally. And so when we think about mental health, this is the thing that I want to make sure we're talking through. When we're not finding ways to express and work through and normalize all of the thoughts and feelings that we have inside of disorder and diagnosis, it will lead to further dysregulation. It will lead to unhealthy habits. It will lead to not really nurturing ourselves well as women, as moms, as parents. I want you to know that this is a huge piece to our own individual wellness. It's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable AF. There are days I hate it. There are days I don't even want to truly embrace and acknowledge and surrender to the idea that this is our path and our story. That's the God's honest truth. For a long time, I felt really ashamed of going into that depth and naming that and sharing that and talking about that. But what I learned is through holding that in and not going to the depth of embracing where we are, that I was doing not only my family a disservice, but more importantly, myself a disservice by letting that mental and emotional weight continue to just weigh me down in so many unnecessary ways. I think one of the hardest part of diagnosis and disorder is the stigma around our society, the stigma inside schools, the stigma inside communities, this idea of not being seen, loved, heard, accepted. I get that. Our family has experienced that in a variety of different ways, which is why we've had to really figure out how to be as open and intentional as possible with finding places and spaces and people that we feel supported with or supported by. Some days we feel really supported. Some days we feel completely on an island. And I think that's the reality for any family. When you have dynamics, when you have personalities, when you have levels of health that you're trying to manage, when you have emotion and feeling and all kinds of things, it's normal to a capacity to feel totally on an island sometimes. And I know what that feels like. And I want you to know that you are not the only one if you've experienced that. And some of the best advice I can give is twofold. The first is finding places to share exactly how you feel and letting go of any shame related to the feelings that you have, because they are real and they are honest and they are not something that you should feel like you can't express or you need to hide in some way. We are human with complexity and feelings and emotions and thoughts, and being open and honest about the depth of that can be one of the things that will set you free inside of your health and inside of your life. The second is just making sure that you are constantly checking your own wellness. So we're not only making sure we're leaning into places where we feel supported, but we're also checking our own wellness. We're thinking about what serves our health. What are the things that are going to help us show up with strength, show up with clarity, and show up with resilience, and most of all, regulation. We've learned through our son that the more dysregulated we are because we haven't been taking care of our wellness, the more dysregulated he becomes. And really that's true for all of our kids. We have 4 kids ranging from 13 to 5, and they all have their own levels of personality, emotion, thoughts, feelings. And the more my husband and I show up dysregulated, the more it dysregulates all of them. Is it exacerbated with our son, who is neurodiverse, who is autistic, who is epileptic, who is TSC diagnosed? Yes, it is exacerbated because his brain is unique. And he sees the world differently, and he processes information differently, and he expresses things differently, and he inquires differently. It's all unique for his specific piece to our family puzzle. But as I shared, the more dysregulated my husband and I show up, the more dysregulated our whole family becomes. So when I think about my own mental health, and I think about leaning into healthy habits, and I think about why it all matters, it not only matters because it helps our family, but beyond that, it helps me. It helps me feel better in my day-to-day life. It helps me show up with intention. It helps me do the best I possibly can, which is incredibly imperfect, but it would be 10 times harder if I wasn't trying to figure out ways to make sure that I'm showing up in a way that keeps my health at the center of what I'm doing in my day-to-day life. If you are a family or a mom that is managing medical complexity or some sort of neurodiverse diagnosis, you have an autistic child, an ADHD child, an epileptic child, any kind of child in any capacity, no matter what it is, I want you to know how beautiful and wonderful and loved you are, your families are, your child is, and that the uniqueness that you might be managing, even on the hardest days, is a gift. And I know that's not always easy to see, and I know that's not always easy to embrace. But I do really believe the more we get into learning about ourselves, but also seeing the gifts in the path that we're on, the more we can continue to normalize all the different levels of the mental health component that we feel inside of a journey like this. My hope and prayer is that this episode served you in some way, encouraged you in some way, and most of all, normalized in some way the depth of what we feel inside of the mental health piece to our wellness, especially as moms of kiddos that have medical complexity or neurodiversity. And above all, please know that you are not the only one and that you are beautiful and loved, as is your family, as is your child, just the way you are. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. I know balancing time and energy can be a challenge, and I'm so proud of you for listening in and investing in your wellness journey. I feel incredibly grateful to connect with you and for the opportunity to share more knowledge, stories, and encouragement related to all things wellness. I would love to hear how this podcast has served you. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and leave a review on either iTunes or Spotify. Your support truly means the world to me and helps me reach more women just like you and me who are looking to transform their health from the inside out. Plus, when you share this episode with a friend, we invite more women in to learn alongside us. What a gift. Remember, knowledge is power, and the more we know, the better we can do. For ourselves, for our families, and our future. Well done on taking the step towards a healthier, happier you. Until next week, stay empowered and stay well.